Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Industry Week webcast, Increase Your International Sales, How to Make Sure You Have the Right Documentation. I'd like to introduce today's presenters. We have with us Richard Foy, who is the Regional Director, Northeast of XM. Prior to joining the bank, he was most recently with the International Finance Group, where as VP of Commercial Lending, he provided loans by working with various funding sources to meet the needs of his clients. Before that, Mr. Foy was marketing and underwriting ocean marine cargo insurance and has an extensive logistics background with over 20 years in the field holding positions in operations, risk management, quality assurance, and environmental affairs. We also have with us today Valerie Colville, who is a co-founder of CC Solutions. Valerie has over 30 years of extensive experience structuring and implementing export cargo agency financing for international corporate, sovereign, and project finance transactions. She is the co-founder of CC Solutions, which is a financial consulting firm created in 2011 to focus on agency finance. She is a registered export credit insurance broker with XM and several private carriers. As Vice President of Fluor Corporation's Project Development Investment Group, she was responsible for developing and leading multi-source complex financing in the oil, gas, power, renewable energy, and mining industries. She is an expert in the export credit agency financing on a global basis. And I'd like to welcome Valerie to the call.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, welcome everybody. As I've been introduced, I'm Valerie Colville and our company CC Solutions. I hope you find today's webinar to be useful, informative, and engaging. I'm really glad you're here to be with us today. Let's start by just telling you a little bit more about what we did, and thank you for the kind introduction. But we really are in the business, for purposes of this call, to help exporters obtain insurance to reduce the risk of non-payment of your overseas receivables. And in that capacity, we're an XM insurance broker, as well as in the private sector market. We can also help you take those insurance policies and boost your capital financing in support of your exports. We also, through the other side of our company, we have several divisions, but we will help structure and arrange loans for your overseas buyers so that they can purchase your goods and services with long-term financing. And this is a very important tool because did you know, for example, that foreign buyers who are given credit terms are 40% more likely to buy from you a second time? And since 95% of the world's population is outside of the U.S., exporting finance, export credit insurance, is a powerful selling tool. So what makes us different at CC Solutions, my partner and I have worked to build a company. We have a nice team. We're based in New York. We have an office in Houston. And we've managed over $3 billion in export credit sales and agency loans for customers around the world. We've worked with hundreds of U.S. suppliers. We have a background, both of us, at engineering companies as well as on Wall Street. So for all the manufacturers and service providers, we live and breathe what you do. Distributors, we understand what goods are and services are. We're neutral to industry, and we're open to any geography where a United States company can do business. We do have a proprietary finance tool that we affectionately call TurboTax for XM, but we work with agency finance around the world, and we help process the documentation for these loans and insurance policies using MTS. And we're delighted to be part of this because my partner Francisco and I started this company because we saw so many documentation problems when we were at a major engineering company on Wall Street that we said there's got to be a better mousetrap. So that's why we started the company and why we're honored to be doing this today. Other things we do, without belaboring it, we do provide training for export credit agency finance around the world. We teach in 5 different cities every year around the world. We have some logistics and shipping capabilities. And the other part of our company that's sort of the heart of where we are is working with documentation for non-bank financial institutions, borrowers, and exporters to help them administer the documentation related to exporting around the world. So let's move into what these insurance products are. The first thing we'll talk about is a single buyer policy. And what is a single buyer policy? That is when you're selling to one buyer and you're either selling once or on an ongoing basis, Ex-Im will provide insurance of up to about 90% of your invoice, whether that's a direct invoice where you are selling directly to your buyer overseas, or perhaps for some of the manufacturers on the line, you are selling a part that goes into a larger piece of equipment that then gets exported. So for those of you that are making parts that go into other larger items that get exported, you also can benefit from this type of insurance. You can extend payment terms to your buyers overseas by up to 180 days. And that's quite a long time, and it helps their cash flow and helps induce the sale that we talked about earlier. And there's no deductible in the event of a claim. We have a little diagram. You're free to review it at a later date, but it basically is Ex-Im. You pay Ex-Im a premium, they provide you the coverage, and then you extend the payment terms to your buyer. The next product is focused, this is the qualification criteria that you would have, the basics of what you need to present to Ex-Im in an application working with us as a broker. Would be a credit report on your company dated within 6 months of your application. You need to be in the same line of business for about 3 years. It's okay if you're more, but that's kind of the cutoff for the minimum. We want to see that your company's operating well. There's no material adverse change, no big loss, no big claim or fraud or anything like that. And then also we'll need information, and so will Ex-Im, on who your buyer is so that Ex-Im's underwriting team can review the creditworthiness of your buyer. Now, the next product is called Multi-Buyer Express Insurance, and Ex-Im created this to fill a need for all the small and medium-sized businesses who are exporting or seeking to export across the United States. The main private insurers that do export insurance have a higher bar of what the premium might be or what the amount of export might be. And Ex-Im created this tool. It's powerful, and Rich will talk to you more about it. But the criteria for this insurance, where you can, again, insure the receivable to an overseas buyer, is that you need to be in business for just 1 year. The items that you're selling, the goods or the services, if you're an engineering company or an architect or even a legal firm, the services have to be at least 50%, and we usually say 51% U.S. content, made here, done here. If you're shipping goods, they need to ship from a U.S. port, a U.S. airport, and this policy will cover up to 10 buyers. So it's a great way to work with your best buyers or your new buyers, or start exporting with assurance that you can have these receivables covered. They'll insure up to 95% of the non-payment risk. The approval is very quick. You know, the bank understands that you're negotiating in the field. You can approve these within about 10 days. The premium is fixed globally. It's a very small price of 65 cents per $100. So you can either pass that price along to your buyer or embed it in your cost, and it'll cover both commercial risks, non-payment, bankruptcy, political risks, war, convertibility, and you can pledge the Ex-Im insurance policy to your bank, and that will often be able to help you boost your working capital financing because you have insured receivables to pledge to the lender. So that's yet another powerful reason to get export insurance. Now, when you're exporting, you have to be mindful of the risks, and risks can often be mitigated by good documentation and good processes. So preventing fraud is impossible, and it exists in smaller transactions all the time. So we always suggest that you detect fraud by starting with some really good due diligence on the sale that you're making overseas. So we'll transition now into more the documentation side of this. So you'll perform due diligence on your participants. You need to know who your customer is. That's often called KYC. You know, ask questions of them. How long have they been in business? Who are they? You know, how many people do they employ? Have some professional skepticism. Check their website. We had a situation recently where we clicked on a company's website that, you know, somebody who had a business card gave us, and it was not at all the company and not even in the same country. So check the website, check the email address. You know, it's okay to call the person. We suggest get verbal contact. So much is done by email and these days, or WhatsApp or whatever. Make contact with the person, know who they are. If you're working overseas, it's never a bad idea to go onto the U.S. government's OFAC sanction list. These are companies and individuals with whom the U.S. government forbids us to work. We always do that as a matter of course whenever we get a new customer, and ask for their bank reference or credit report. So these are some fraud prevention ideas. Detecting fraud, we're throwing up here a couple of common types you may see. Fraudulent financial statements, they're not dated, they're not signed, a fuzzy name of an auditor, falsified documents that are invoices and shipping. We see this. This is a very simple way that fraud happens, and if you're not careful reading your documents, this could really trip you up. Things that you would see that would be falsified might be document inconsistencies, vague product description, price changes, quantities vary, and so forth. Even the font sizes and types of font changing throughout the course of a document. The types of fraud that you see is often most likely to be price padding to inflate the value of an export so somebody makes money on the side. If you're working in the two area codes of 305 and 915, those have been shown to have the most fraudulent export. Those are the two most fraudulent export markets in the United States. So not saying not to do business there, of course, because they're huge markets, but seller beware in those area codes. And if you see perfect signatures on multiple documents, that means somebody has not signed them by hand, right? And you don't really know who has signed them. So with all the fraud protection you can try and do in due diligence, we really say the best way to mitigate your fraud is to obtain EXIM export credit insurance. Now, in order to do EXIM's insurance and really have strong ability to prove that you've made a sale and that you've proved your shipment, we're going to transition now into some of the fundamental documents EXIM will require you to show them in the event that you have a claim event. So this is good business practice for everybody, whether or not you're exporting, whether or not you're using EXIM, but an invoice, first of all, you need a purchase order or contract, fine. But then you're going to invoice against it. So these are the 7 things EXIM will absolutely fire in on when they want to see a document to assess whether or not it's real, and they can make a claim assessment over it. So on your invoice, make sure it has your letterhead, it has a purchase order number, your address in the U.S. is shown. EXIM wants to prove that you are a U.S. exporter, so a street address is preferable to a P.O. box. Have the local address of your borrower in whatever country, again, preferably a street address, not a P.O. box. Make sure the invoice number, the invoice date are on there, the invoice amount, the currency, if it's not U.S. dollars, is described, and a really good description of the goods or the services. One truck isn't going to do it, but one Ford F-50 pickup with such and such dimensions with the VIN number of this, that's a more solid proof of what you have sold. And for reference, in the materials, we've provided a sample invoice with 5 problems. And these are the things that we talked about, where every invoice looks different, but there's no invoice number here, there's no date, there's no description. Any one of these missing on your invoice could cause you to not be able to claim under your policy. So that's why we really, have this webinar to talk about documentation. This sounds easy. We see a lot of times when these things are not here and it trips you up and you don't get the claim money you thought you could. Similarly, we have the same type of situation with bills of lading. Bills of lading are the shipping documents, whether you're shipping by rail, truck, air, sea. You have to prove that your item not just was sold, but was shipped. So these are the items we tend to see EXIM requiring on a bill of lading. Simply the word bill of lading, a bill of lading number, how it's shipped, when it's shipped. Make sure that somebody shipped signed. Now, we just had a situation yesterday where a customer, an exporter, was tripped up because he signed his own shipping document. Well, it has to be an independent third party. The buyer and the seller cannot sign a bill of lading. It has to be shown to be a freight forwarder, a carrier, or somebody independent of the transaction. The shipping location on the bill of lading has to match where the supplier's address is, where it's going to, what country it's going to, and so forth. And again, just as with the invoices, we gave you a sample bill of lading showing you 5 common problems with it. So now we have a situation where unfortunately our buyer hasn't paid us. What do you do? Well, let's take now and move the documentation into real live action where we have to submit the claim documents to EXIM. EXIM will require the signed purchase order. They will require the commercial invoice with all the items we just talked about, the bill of lading, which evidences that it was exported. EXIM will also want to see a written demand of payment to your buyer once the payment is late. So take it upon yourself. It could be an email, it can be a letter, but it has to be written evidence that you could then show later to EXIM that they were late on May 1st. So by May 10th, I gave them a couple of days, but here I've asked them, I've notified them of payment. Then once it's late and you decide you want to go into the beginning of a claims, potentially you send a claims notice to EXIM, which you do online. And as brokers, we help you with all the online application and claims processing. But it's very important to know these requirements so that, again, you're planning in advance to fail and have your buyer not do what they're supposed to do and pay you. But most of the time things go right, but when it doesn't, it's great to have these documents. This charts out EXIM's claim process where you'll see just, basically we talked about, you start off with the non-payment situation. You write evidence that you've tried to have collected. There is a 90-day waiting period at EXIM after you've notified them of non-payment. You wait 90 days, you try and continue to collect, and then if after 90 days you can't, you have from 90 days and another 5 months to make a claim to EXIM. So you don't have to make it on the 91st day. You can make it on the 123rd day. As long as you make it within that 3 months to 8 month period, that is the claim period for EXIM. If you go beyond that, you have lost your ability to claim on your policy. So that's another thing we would help you do as a broker, but it's paramount that you watch that time period. And I'm sure, Rich, you've had situations where people just didn't get the timing in and lost the ability to claim.
Unfortunately, we see that, yeah.
Yeah. So just to conclude, the next 2 slides, one is documentation is essential. It's good practice for any of you that are exporting. It's at the heart of CC Solutions and why we formed our company. When you're about to embark on exporting, or you're about to embark with export credit insurance or export credit loans, instructing all the parties on the required documentation information is recommended by us. It's recommended by EXIM, so everybody knows what they have to do, and they're not scrambling later, or you're not missing deadlines, and you're not missing information. So plan ahead. Organize and manage your documents. Manage your procurement team, logistics, and everybody in the chain to minimize the potentiality of fraud. And if a claim event occurs, this is why you have the insurance. Follow the EXIM timeline. Provide the documents that you now have in really good shape to support the fact that you made a sale, you made a delivery, and you weren't paid for a variety of covered reasons. Use a broker. We are not paid by any of you on the phone. Our commission is paid by EXIM, so I always like to say we're free because we are. You're for those of you that are small business, it's 65 cents per 100, period. Whether or not you use us, we hope you will. And with that, you'll file your claim and hopefully get paid. So I hope you found this interesting and informative, and help you move forward. I'd like to hand this off to my friend Rich, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Valerie. I appreciate you going over that documentation. It's so important, as is having a broker on the policy. I can't stress that enough. Should you choose to have an insurance policy for your export receivables, that you engage with a broker. They can go over all those documentation issues prior to you using the policy, so you know you're in good shape. So I'm Richard Foy. I'm the Regional Director for the Northeast, and I'm going to go over our insurance product as well as our loan guarantee product with you. It won't take too much time, and I appreciate your patience. What we do is we support U.S. businesses. We give them the tools so that they're in good position, good, strong position to compete in the global market. We're established in 1934. XM is an independent agency of the U.S. government, and we're headquartered in Washington, D.C. We operate throughout the U.S. in 12 regional offices, and our mission is quite simply to support American jobs by facilitating the export of U.S. goods and services. Keep that in mind. Last year, we supported over $2.5 billion in exports for U.S. small businesses alone. Over 90% of all of our transactions across the bank were for small business. So we really have a focus on small business at the bank. No company or deal is too small. We value every company because these are the guys, you are the guys that are creating the jobs, and we recognize that. So how do we support you? When you engage with XM, we offer tools that allow you to offer competitive credit terms to your foreign buyers. You can reduce your risk of non-payment from your foreign buyers. And you can use our tools to obtain pre-export working capital for you to procure or produce the goods and services that you ultimately export. We can also help arrange term financing for your foreign buyers on capital goods. I'll go over our first solution, which is export credit insurance. Valerie went through it in her slide, but I'll do it again because it's important that the risk protection you get from this is really powerful. I see that people exercise extreme caution when extending credit domestically, and that's encouraged, of course, but often you have small businesses, they're so afraid of the foreign market of not getting paid that they either require cash in advance or force people into complex letters of credit that are also costly. More and more we see foreign buyers are demanding open payment terms, and exporters are missing out on sales by not offering them. So with our export credit insurance, you're able to extend the terms to your foreign buyers. We vet them on our express policy. This can easily be used as a sales tool. I encourage people to get a policy in place prior to going on a sales visit overseas. This way you have the capacity to offer them terms safely. And once you have those receivables that are insured, you can use that to add to your borrowing base, often increasing your borrowing power with a lender that you work with. The risks that are covered are your commercial risks, insolvency, bankruptcy, protracted default. But everybody's afraid of non-payment for some reason from their foreign buyer, but the political risks shouldn't be discounted. These are very real and outside of many people's control. Currency transfer risks, war, revolution, insurrection, cancellation of import-export licenses, a very important one that is not in your control or in the control of your foreign buyer. The policies that are geared towards small business, I'll go over here. Our Express policy is really built for those that are new to export or those new to exporting on open credit terms. And what we do there, because these are kind of less sophisticated, I'll say, exporters, we take on the credit burden. We take on the expense of checking the credit of your foreign buyers. We limit it to 10 to be qualified for this program, but we offer 95% coverage, no deductible, and the premiums pay as you go, which is nice because you don't have any large deposit premium that you have to come up with. So Once you graduate from there, you move into a small business multi-buyer, and because you're more familiar with the process now, you obtain the credit on your foreign buyer, and as a result, you enjoy a lower premium. Single buyer, Valerie touched on earlier as well. We can provide 90% coverage and no deductible for a single buyer that you need coverage on. I want to give you an example of the rates because even though the rates start at 65 cents on our Express policy, that's up to 60 days term. They can go up to 180 days. For example, the premium would increase. As an example here on $25,000 sale, that would only be a little over $160 in premium, so it's very reasonable. And if you do use either an XM working capital guarantee or an SBA working capital guarantee, you enjoy a 25% rate reduction on your premiums because we understand these two products really do go hand in hand in building your export business. Valerie kind of started on the end once you have a claim, so I'll go through choosing. First you choose a policy, and then you extend the terms to your buyer. You negotiate the sale, and once you ship the goods, you report the shipment to XM, and you pay premium at that time. So that's a nice component. Unfortunately, see, my example says the buyer pays because I like when they pay. But if they fail to pay, then you wait the 90 days. You make notification to them that they owe you the money, and then you file a claim with XM. Our other solution is on the working capital. These are loans that are made by your lender, and we back them. So we guarantee the loan to the lender. We assist small businesses in obtaining the working capital, again, to produce or procure the goods for export. There's no minimum or maximum loan amounts. That's the difference between us and the SBA. They have a cap of $5 million on their loans. We don't. I will say that is still lender dependent, so you have to meet the lender's criteria. Perhaps they can only support loans over $1 million or whatever. That's very specific, and you can contact me to get fit with the proper lender for your needs. The loans can support advances made against your inventory, including WIP, as well as the foreign receivables, because we're insuring them. Line of credits may also be used to collateralize a standby letter of credit that can be used as a performance bond. And what's nice is that only a 25% collateralization is required, whereas typical is 100%. So we went through, actually, Valerie went through the eligibility criteria. You must be in business selling for at least 3 years. The exceptions are our Express program, 1 year in business. And we look at businesses under 1 year on the single buyer because the emphasis in underwriting is really on that foreign buyer. You must have a DUNS number and financial statements or tax returns. The content has to be greater than 50% U.S., and this includes labor, but it excludes markup. So this is on a cost basis. We cannot support military or defense-related products. There are exceptions. Life-saving products are one of the exceptions. I don't have the whole list, but there are certain exceptions. I believe you can find that on our website, xm.gov. The U.S. content on the short term, those are the insurance products. It must be 50%. We've hit that home today, I think. The medium term, we can support up to 85% U.S. content. We do have a list of restricted countries, those countries that we cannot support or we may have limitations. That can also be found on our website. It's called the Country Limitation Schedule. The exports cannot have a negative economic impact on the U.S. In certain cases, there'll be shipping requirements or conditions, and we look for additionality, meaning why does XM have to participate in a given transaction?
Hey, Rich?
So I'll show you. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say on the shipping side, that really comes into play other than everything that ships from the U.S. has to ship from a U.S. port of departure, but the shipping rules for the medium term and long term come into play when you're shipping more than $20 million worth of goods.
Thank you.
So for the small deals, as long as you get from a U.S. port, you should be good.
Exactly, right. There's three basic rules when you're working with us. You have to bill, especially on the insurance. You have to ship from the U.S. You have to bill to a foreign party, and you have to have 50% or greater U.S. content. Those three, you're generally good to go. So one company that has had tremendous success after working with XM with insurance is Robin Sports. These guys make excellent floors. You've probably seen them if you watch basketball, and they've been shipping with XM since 2003, and they've jumped their sales from 5% to 15%. 5% exports to 15% of their total sales in export. And the President Jay over there says there's no way he would have been able to participate in this global market without our support. There was demand for terms being offered for their product. They looked at various solutions, and XM fit the bill for them perfectly. So that's a great success story. It's one of many that we're pleased to support these small businesses. These are the offices that we operate out of. This presentation will be available for you. These numbers and individuals are also available on our website, xm.gov, so please feel free to visit our website for a local contact. And if anybody has any questions, I hope you've typed them in. I know we have some questions received already. I want to just add, I just want to put up here, if anyone wants to be contacted by us, you can select here. And do we have any questions at this point?
Actually, just one quick thing. Sorry, before we do that, apologies, it's Valerie. Just want to let everyone know that we have created, for purposes of the attendees on this webinar, a checklist, a documentation checklist. That's available through the screen and also through follow-up. That it lists for invoices and for fraud and for bills of lading the things we went over today. But it's a nice, handy checklist you can keep online or hand to your colleagues or email to a freight forwarder and so forth. Sorry. Thank you so much.
That's perfect. Bonus materials for the attendees.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll get into the questions. Before I start, though, I do want to ask that everybody please take a moment to complete the feedback form that appears on the left side of your screen. Val, this question is for you. Are there required shipping terms that require the seller to retain ownership of product up to the vessel at outgoing port?
Whoops, my phone is funny. So that depends on whether, and I'm not a freight forwarder and shipping expert, so I'll couch it by saying that, but it depends on the Incoterms and whether it's free on board, where you and your buyer have agreed to transfer the ownership through the invoice. So sometimes it's at the factory gate, sometimes it's at the port, sometimes it's delivery at the final location. And so I hope that answers the question, but it's whatever you document in your invoice and in your contract, then that is where the transfer would take place.
Okay, another
right.
question.
I just want to add to that the Incoterms are great, but they really identify where the risk transfers. The contract always dictates the ownership and where that transfers and where insurance will pick up and so on.
Okay, thanks. Rich, this question's for you. We are a manufacturer that drop ships products to our U.S. customers. Our customer is the exporter. Legally, what documentation or information are we required to provide? So you're not
exporting directly. Yours is, if it's a domestic sale, then you're not obligated to provide the details of. Well, that's a complicated question, and I would love to take it offline because it's a more complicated question than as it was asked. So somebody can reach out to me directly, and I'll discuss it with them.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Next question. Do I understand correctly that we can set up an express multi-customer approval now for anticipated sales later this year?
Yeah, absolutely. We can put a policy in place. We can underwrite, but we can underwrite the foreign buyers, although I suggest not underwriting them until you have a sale in hand. So my suggestion is always to get a policy put in place so that once you have an opportunity to sell to a foreign buyer, we can underwrite that buyer. That underwriting doesn't take very long. It's typically between 5 and 10 days, depending on how much we have to go through to vet that client.
Okay, another question, Rich. Can material for international humanitarian relief be financed?
Valerie, maybe this is a better question for you.
I never had that question. It's so yeah. So if it's goods that are made here and you're shipping it to a buyer and you have evidence of an invoice, they're paying for it, fine. If it's a donation, that would not work. You have to show evidence of a sale that you would insure. So if it doesn't matter if it's a relief organization that's buying something, yes. If it's a relief organization to whom you are donating, no.
Okay, and Rich, this question is for you. Does XM have any resources that addresses bailment agreements?
That addresses, again, I'd need more information on that. So I would encourage that person to contact me directly.
Okay. This question, I'll start with Val, and Rich, you can jump in. It's a little bit long, so hang with me here. How do you measure U.S. content? We buy used machinery that was manufactured overseas, refurbished it in the U.S., and resell it. The labor to refurbish it is entirely done in the U.S., but the machines were originally manufactured outside the U.S. Would we qualify for export insurance?
Okay. So actually, the answer is yes, it depends. XM does allow used equipment to be both insured and also to be covered by guaranteed loans. The eligibility of what it is, we'd have to look at very carefully, particularly because it wasn't made here. And what I would suggest is if you want, contact me later. XM does have a pretty good description on its website of what it accepts as used equipment. And, the labor, yes, but we'd have to see, for example, what percentage of the actual item does the actual item reach that 50% or not, and can you prove that? How much, like you said, is the labor, and maybe other services. So I'd suggest we start together by looking at what you have and compare it to the used equipment questionnaire on XM's website. And if it meets the eligibility requirements, the answer is sure, let's go for it.
Right. And I agree with that. I mean, really, if you're adding more than 50% value to that through U.S. Resources, then it's probably a go. If not, then it's probably a no.
Okay, this next question is
if I just might add on eligibility, as Rich and I have been talking about, if you're looking at short-term insurance, 50% or 51% to be safe of U.S. content is your bogey. If you're looking at medium and long-term loans, please contact contact us. We do a tremendous amount of eligibility analysis for both exporters and buyers all over the world. It becomes much more complex when you're getting into a longer-term lending situation, and it's a specialty that we offer to the market. But for the purpose of this, 50% is your hurdle rate.
Okay, the next question is, we receive purchase orders by email. Are these valid for documentation?
Sure. Why not?
Yeah, most people do at this point.
Yep.
Okay, so Rich, the next question is for you. What's the best way to find qualified foreign buyers?
There are so many. I always suggest working with other agencies such as U.S. Commercial Services. They have great benefits for exporters. They can help vet buyers, schedule meetings for you, and even help identify new markets.
And furthering on that, the U.S. Commercial Service also offers international trade shows around the United States where they support it. They have some really great prices for small businesses to attend. So, for example, in, I think, December in Las Vegas, there's PowerGen International. So anybody that does anything with power and energy equipment and is interested in selling overseas, buyers come there, and U.S. companies also go there, and you often can get funding from the U.S. government or perhaps from your local state to even attend conferences like that.
Okay, the next question. When an exporter sells X plant and is not responsible for ocean or air freight and does not have evidence that products actually leave the U.S., what documents will XM accept or prove that the products were exported?
Well, you'll need
if you're insuring, if you're insuring that, that's where XM would be involved, and you would need a complete export file. I think you can use a forwarder certificate for that if a bill of lading is not available, but you should work with the forwarder that you send the goods to obtain all of the necessary documentation for a complete export file.
Yeah, and you can also make that as part of your contract or purchase order with your buyer, that even though you are not responsible for the shipping, as part of the sale, you will, need a copy of the bill of lading from whoever does it. That's the kind of, I think that was one of the points we were trying to make earlier, is that, and I'm really glad this question came up, because that goes to the heart of planning ahead. It might not be in your scope, but if you're insuring it, make that in your contract, and that will help smooth the file over and create a complete export file that Rich was just talking about.
Yeah, because remember, even though you're not responsible for coordinating or paying for the shipping, you still have responsibility as a U.S. exporter. So from a documentation standpoint, you still have responsibilities, and it's important that you work with a freight forwarder and maybe even demand of your foreign buyer that it has to be certain portions of the transaction have to be performed by your trusted freight forwarder.
Okay, before I ask the next question, I just want to let our audience know that we still have some time. So at this point, you still can go ahead and submit more questions. Okay, this question is, do purchase orders received by email still need to have a signature as opposed to an unsigned electronic version of the PO?
So for the purchase order or service contract, it is best to have, we always say, a wet ink signature. Bills of lading can be accepted by XM with electronic signatures. That's pretty standard. But to cross your T's and dot your I's, we always suggest that the purchase order has a wet ink, and that's our go-to comment. Yeah.
Okay, this question is, could either of you recommend a U.S. government agency that would help me confirm documentations, duties, taxes, etc. for exporting to Mexico?
I believe commercial services would be able to assist in that regard. If they don't have all the answers, they would definitely be able to plug in the right resource to get that question answered fully.
And wherever this particular company is located, the U.S. Commercial Service has what they call Export Assistance Centers, or EACs, all around the United States, just like Rich was showing that Exim has 12 offices. The Commercial Services has Export Assistance Centers, and that would be a good local place to start with that question.
You can find that at export.gov.
Okay, this question is for Val. What is the advantage of working with CC Solutions?
Oh, well, hopefully I've sold you on us then. I think I guess the main part is that we've been doing this for very many years, and we really understand the documentation risks and the documentation benefits that go to the heart of export finance. We've worked on over $3 billion worth of export finance in the last couple of years. We've been in business for a while. And so we speak procurement, we speak engineering, we speak exports, we know what your documents need to look like, and it's the heart of our company. We're not just selling insurance, and there's nothing against just selling insurance, but we have a deeper knowledge of the documentation and the risks. We also have customers around the world. We've worked on projects that range from $10 million to $10 billion. We know buyers and sellers all over the place. If you're a sub-supplier, we might be able to help you get to a larger supplier. We both come out of engineering construction companies, so we understand EPC service contracts, and we're a recognized leader in the world at teaching export finance. So, I think our skills, our credentials, and our service to our customers, we're there to help you. I mean, we really want to we've seen so many train wrecks. We went into our company to help people avoid train wrecks. So, we're passionate about giving accurate and timely support to our customers.
Okay, question for Rich. How long does it take to receive a quote on the Exim policy?
We say 10 days. Typically, I see them coming out within 5.
Okay. Sorry, there's a lot of questions coming in. I'm just trying to monitor. Is there a limit of $10 million for loans?
Right now, we don't have a complete board, so we are capped at $10 million. We're in the process of filling out the board, which we all hope happens soon, at which point that cap will be lifted. So it's a short term, yes.
Okay. Next question. Does any of the documentation need to be authenticated by an embassy?
That's outside of this. I mean, right, Val. I mean, that's really dependent on customs requirements where you're shipping to.
In particular, it doesn't apply to the insurance. If you're looking at a medium-term loan, for example, or long-term loan, oftentimes you might see that kind of documentation to, prove a delivery, but not really. I mean, we see more like avals and that kind of thing with, certifying that the company exists or the guarantors are really, people who are alive and breathing and own this company, but no, not really.
Okay, next question. Is there a minimum amount of an invoice to be able to apply for insurance?
No, that's a great thing. There's no minimum amount. So we could support these really small guys. We recognize the small business, they might get an order for $5,000, and that's not a big order, but losing $5,000 for non-payment, that means a lot. So we'll insure that. We'll insure less. There's no minimum premium.
Okay, and then you had mentioned a commercial service, and they wanted to find out which service that was you mentioned before, and how do they get in touch with them?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's U.S. Commercial Services. That's a part of Department of Commerce, and you can go to their website. It's export.org. I'm sorry, export.gov.
Sorry. Next question is, what are the current restrictions for obtaining export credit insurance for Russia and the Ukraine?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're off cover, meaning that we can't support shipments to Russia at this point. And that can be found in our country limitation schedule.
Exactly, yeah. The country limitation schedule is on EXIM's website. It's a great tool to see where EXIM is open, and also for those of you that are looking at long-term financing for your buyers, other than please call us because we can help you navigate that. It'll say both, if you're dealing with public sector or private sector, if you're dealing long-term or short-term. It's a very good tool for this exact kind of question.
Okay. At this point, we have taken care of the audience questions, so I will thank our speakers for an excellent presentation today and our sponsor, the EXIM Bank. As a reminder, if you're registered as a group, please add the names and emails of all attendants on the exit survey. On behalf of Industry Week, have a productive remainder of the day.